Yeah, I think that part of the reason why I brought this particular miniature in here was this is actually representative. It's called the Camelback Bench. It's in Phoenix, and a landscape architect who we were working with, he told me, he said, Darren, I've had this image in my mind since I was a young boy, but could never build it with cast in place. You could not, this is 22 unique pieces that are 3D printed, could not have produced this economically with precast. And he had just the right client who wanted to do something super unique. And we had come into his office the day after he met with his client, and his client, when presented this concept that was made out of precast, was kind of like, it's kind of basic. It's kind of basic. And we happened to come into this landscape architect's office the next day.
Oh, cool.
And we told him, if you can dream it, we can print it.
Right. One of the things that always struck me being the host of the Landscape Architecture podcast is the lack of recognition for the amazing work being done by small to mid-sized firms all across the country. Work that often outshines larger firms in both design and execution, yet their stories are not being told. At first, I began advocating for these firms to publications through the proximity networks that I built via the podcast. Over time, firms began reaching out, asking for assistance on an ever-increasing scale and scope of request. Eventually, public relations surpassed design, and it was time to let go of me practicing landscape architecture and fully commit to HAPS agency, a trajectory unforeseen by me, but truly welcomed, because I love being a champion for landscape architects. HAPS agency is a public relations firm that applies the same design process I once used as a designer, but for storytelling. Being modern and efficient allows us to offer packages scaled for solo practitioners, mid-sized firms, and multi-office national practices. We work tirelessly to help you earn awards, secure RFPs, attract new clients, and build public trust, supported by our photography and art direction that publications want to feature on their covers. To view our case studies, visit hapsagency.com, HAPS agency.com.
Hi, thanks for having me, Michael. Darren Baldwin, president of Pikus 3D. We are the pioneer of custom 3D printed products that are both fun and fast to produce for your client. I started my career doing business strategy consulting, of all things, and worked for a client in structural concrete. You may have heard of Baker Concrete, Lithco Contracting, two of the largest structural concrete contractors in North America. And they're always looking to innovate and be more productive. So fast forward 20 years later, after working for that client, I ended up working for both of those companies, and also leaving to help start a software company. And so have been in early stage business, disruptive tech, software. Having both concrete as well as disruptive tech experience was kind of perfect fit for 3D printing and what we're doing here today.
And do you consider 3D printing concrete a disruptive industry?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
How so?
When you look at concrete construction and the innovations that we've seen in the last 4 decades, and I've asked people, I say, what's the biggest productivity increase you've seen in concrete construction in the last, that you can remember? And people mention the laser screed. The laser screed came out in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so when you think of that slow of innovation, that's why it is challenging to innovate. It's a challenge to innovate within construction in general, because people have means and methods that are tried and true, and because it's a low risk industry. It's understood, right, that when you have something that works, why mess with it?
Sure. So what then do you offer that is like advantageous to working with 3D printing concrete?
Yeah, so 3D printing is advantageous in, first and foremost, that it doesn't use forms like what you use with cast in place concrete. You got to set some boards and pour concrete in it, or molds. Precast uses molds, and both of those end up in the landfill someday. So you're building something that you throw away And that takes time and money. Here we have in front of us, we're sitting at this conference room table that was 3D printed out of concrete. There was no forms or molds used. You could come up with a 3D model in the morning, print it in the afternoon, in theory, right? And that fits a more automated, speedy construction process.
So I think one of the things I like about 3D printing, I'm a 3D printing hobbyist, I would say. I have 2 printers and I sold one and I still have 2 and I like playing with it. One of the things that I like is the rapid prototyping. Is I could move through ideas really quick. I could go from concept, sketch on a piece of paper, put it in a Rhino, print it out, and then once it's tangible, then I could think about it in a different way than just on a screen. Do you find that helpful as well? And then do you print miniature mock-ups first?
The feedback loop in 3D printing of concrete, you're right, Michael, is incredibly fast. We had someone visit yesterday, an architect come into town, and we had gone through the iteration to do a full-size mock-up, to do a piece. We ended up doing 5 pieces for them and doing it with various coatings and shades of color, much speedier than you could have done with cast in place. No one would do a 20-foot section cast in place or a 20-foot section all unique pieces for precast. I mean, every linear foot of the 20 feet was unique. That would be a challenge to do with precast. Very costly at a minimum to do in 30 days. And so we did it in 30 days. We actually have another iteration we're going to do in 2 weeks. And those kind of adjustments on the fly, because of that feedback loop, we're able to move quicker. And that helps the client make a decision, right? So imagine you're an architect working with a client who's a finicky client, an opinionated client. Of course, being able to iterate quicker, prototype quicker is an advantage in that feedback loop.
And then are the prototypes sometimes at full scale or half scale or or just case by case?
Yeah, so I mean, you can see a representative model in front of me. This is a 35-foot diameter seat wall that was part of a private project. And so we do miniatures like this, take a model of what the designer and client are thinking, get it into something that they can put their hands on, send it to their office, and we're fabricating directly from the same model. And then, yes, we also do full-size mock-ups as that process matures.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because you just scale it down. It's just a vector-based math thing that you just open up to full size and then bring it down. Or
yeah, we actually do it the opposite way. We work on the model
at 1-to-1.
That is 1-to-1 for our 3D printer, and once we get that model right, then we send out the miniature or do a mock-up of that.
Right, and you do all that in-house.
We do all that in-house.
Yeah. So tell me about weight and strength, and let's start with weight and strength.
Yeah. Well, most people, when they think of concrete, they think of gray, they think of flat or hard edges, they think of cracks. And that would be true. And so we tend to work from that anchored concept of concrete. It's also, most people don't think about it this way, but in landscape, it's often way excessively over-engineered. You know, when you do a planter wall, we're often doing them, say, 8 inches thick. And that's because it's not practical for a cast-in-place crew to try to cast a wall that's 1 inch thick, for example, if that's all they needed. Right, benches, they're often, if they're not retaining soil, they're just holding up a human being. And yet, with cast-in-place and precast, it's usually solid, which is excessively heavy. Means you're spending money on freight, you're spending money on material you really don't need, you're putting it on a podium deck, which now you have the more steel to hold up that weight. And then at the end of its life cycle, you have more weight to throw out. In our process, we're between 84 to 95% less material than a comparable precast object.
Sure.
Okay. And so we have all those advantages of velocity through the supply chain. as well as it's a safer, faster install experience on the user end.
When is it appropriate to use cast in place versus 3D printing?
If you have something that's boring and repeatable, cast in place is still the best method to do something cheap and straight and plain. Once you get into objects that are asymmetric, that have organic curves, or something that's not so repeatable, it's an object that is maybe gets into sculptural flow realm, much like this miniature in front of me, that's where 3D concrete print excels. I'm not going to be against cast in place or precast. There's, cast in place has been around for thousands of years. Precast has been hundreds of years. 3D concrete print's only in its 20s. There's things it's still learning in its 20s, right? And there's things that, use cases that are still coming to the surface that make sense.
A lot of your targeted demographic is landscape architects.
100% of our target is landscape.
Okay, 100%.
Right. We are getting into interiors.
Sure.
So maybe you could say, okay, we're maybe 5% focused on interiors. But yeah, we are entirely outdoor focused with landscapers today, and then getting into some interior architects. So yeah, landscape architects, 100% is our focus.
Why? Why are you focusing on landscape architects right now?
To be blunt, with an early stage business, you don't want to take this material, which maybe you don't quite understand, and put it on a facade above guests. Right? It's definitely lower risk to do something that's incredible and cool in a landscape. And we do feel like landscape architecture has some places and spaces, like seating with LED lighting, that is in this season and time very engaging. Post-COVID times where people want to gather, they want to spend time outdoors together. It's a time where this technology can shine.
Yeah, and the barrier to entry for your product lends itself well to smaller residential projects as well. Is that?
It's an interesting question, Michael. We don't focus at all on residential, although we do have a NFL and NBA player that have it in their backyard. It's not the cheapest of materials. It is early stage in the technology, and so it is price per square foot a little bit higher. But in all of the situations you see on our website, that you might see on our social media platforms, anything that I post on, it's all private money where people said, against all the other solutions, precast or cast in place, I'm going 3D concrete print because it was a better total value solution, either in speed or weight or price or all of the above.
How do you get around not using rebar?
Great question. Now, we've used rebar. If you look at our Disney Epcot planters, we have rebar in the footer. But as I mentioned previously, Michael, these landscape products are often over-engineered when cast in place or precast. We're getting away from rebar by using non-steel products. We've heard from the aquariums when they're around marine life. We've heard from Universal Studios. One of the primary reasons why a lot of concrete fails is because corroding rebar. And so what we have engineered out steel for the most part. We use a polyurethane foam because many of our products end up on a podium deck. It maintains lightweight while increasing flexural strength in combination with our very, very high compressive strength of our material. I like to think about bulletproof glass, right? Glass by itself is very weak. It tends to be made thin, and I tend to talk to our installers as saying, hey, treat 3D concrete print like glass, like a precious sculpture, because it is a unique one of a kind, and we're printing it to very, very thin layers. Now, it is high in compressive strength. We do batch tests at our manufacturer. We also do 2x2 cube tests here with everything we print, so we can lot test everything that goes out and make sure that we're at or above our specifications. So we're anywhere between 8 to 14,000 psi on compressive strength. But when you're shipping something that's fragile, long, like this conference room table, that's 9 feet long, 4 feet wide, and only an inch thick, you're at the very fuzzy edge of its design limitations. That's why in-house we handle all of the design, engineering, and fabrication to ensure that its end use is every bit as strong as it needs to be. And so, although it's strong from a compressive, like glass can be, from a flexural strength, we have to add, it is, in material science, it is basically a laminate, effectively, just like bulletproof glass, in order to give it that strength it needs in order to endure the shipping and installation stresses, which are often the biggest stresses our products go through.
So is the material extruded out of the nozzle? Do you refer to it as a substrate, or how do you refer to that material?
Yeah, in additive manufacturing, we refer to the material as a filament. Yeah, so it's actually a 3-part filament. So our system is considered a 3K system because it's a 3-part. It's got mortar, it's got poly, and it's got an activator. The mortar is truly cementitious material, and when you see it, it's basically a white concrete, depending on our mix design, between 8 and 14,000 psi. The poly, we need poly in order to minimize water. We effectively are introducing like microscopic rubber bands, right, that give it a little bit more flexural strength. It also just helps it pump smoothly through the hose, because we got to pump this through a long hose. And the activator, right before it comes out of the print head, is mixed in, and so it speeds up the exothermic reaction that all concrete goes through in order to cure. We need it to be very quick in order to achieve the overhang angles that you see. When you look at our shapes online, we are getting up to 90 degree in a compressive structure, and in some cases on straight lines doing 35, 45 degree overhang angles. And we need that activator. It needs to be fast, but not too fast. So there's there's this funny dance between hardware, software, and chemistry. We can't have it set up too quick, or when the print head comes around, it'll be dry and you won't get a strong bond. You want a monolithic concrete structure at the end. And so it still has to be wet and pliable when it comes back around, but set up quick enough so that when you get a few layers up, it's still holding it. Right?
So every time you try something new, a new formula, a new color, then are you adjusting, like fine-tuning the speed rate, the drop rate, all of that stuff, and does that cause a lot of...
Every little thing we change does require some adjustment.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you're getting faster. The more you do it, the faster you're understanding what you can and can't do. But is it a constant evolution, or playing, or tinkering, maybe?
Yeah, you may have seen us on HGTV this past week, where some of the designers use an integral color, and we now can use any integral color under the rainbow in our product. And yes, anytime we introduce something, we have to evaluate how does that affect the compressive or flexural strength, if at all. And yeah, that's part of our calculus, and that is part of our day-to-day as we go through the process with the designer to evaluate what is that intended design, what engineering or changes do we need to do in order to achieve high quality fabrication. So I'll just walk you through a story of what happened here recently. We're working on a large high-rise remodel, and a friend of this landscape architect has a interior design project going on. And so we get the introduction. We often get referral business because it is new technology, and people, I think they like hearing from someone they trust.
Sure, once you've been vetted, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, that we've been vetted, that we've been around. And we've been around for really the longest in the United States, focused on commercial landscapes. There's no one who was focused on the landscape architect before Pikus 3D was doing 3D concrete print. Because of that, I think we've garnered quite a bit of trust in managing high UV, high freeze thaw environment, high abuse environments like what you see in entertainment hospitality. And so it starts with our landscape architect expressing, whether it be on a napkin sketch or through schematics. It's normally in the schematic phase of the design process where we get to see some kind of artwork about what they want to achieve with this. And so we then take the schematic design and we respond often with, yes, it's feasible. And then the question is like, what is it going to look like? And sometimes we get a design that maybe isn't printable, right? We don't expect any of our landscape architects to be experts in hand modeling with Rhino, although we do get some incredible 3D models. We normally go through an iteration process with our landscape architect in order to achieve something that's printable, that's fairly efficient, that can be coded in the way. 80% of our products are coded when they go out of our factory typically. Although I love and I'm a fan of the raw print, I just think some owners aren't yet ready to embrace the boldness of a raw print yet. Although many designers I think are.
Sure, it's almost like a characteristic of it. Like some designers I could see probably embracing the I guess you would call it resolution.
That's correct.
Right. So the resolution of the layers.
Yeah.
Right? I tend to personally, I do like it. I think makes a statement on its own.
It does.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you get to a point where you've done iterations and they sign off.
Yeah, and we're often under some kind of design assist during the DD phase where the client may pay some nominal fee to have us engage and kind of bring the schematics to a point either fully modeled, but at a minimum something, shop drawings that can be referenced in the CD set so that when they go to permit, they've got how is this thing going to be attached, how much soil is it going to retain, and what is it designed for. And we have a Pikus specification specifically for seat walls and retaining of soil, and that does detail our attachments and all the means and methods that go into installation.
That's cool. So you and I, we did a walking tour through the new Bees Stadium here in Utah. And one of the things when we were walking and talking, you were mentioning that when you do lunch and learns and you're talking about your service and your product, that all of a sudden there's a moment with the landscape architects where they get this aha, and like this, then their faces kind of wander off and you see their creativity going. It's like, oh wait, I could now print almost any shape in any form. And then when you said that, you smiled really big, like that's the moment where they get it, right? Like, do you see that moment happen a lot?
All the time. Yeah, I think that part of the reason why I brought this particular miniature in here was this is actually representative. It's called the Camelback Bench. It's in Phoenix. And a landscape architect who we were working with, he told me, he said, Darren, I've had this image in my mind since I was a young boy, but could never build it with cast plates. You could not, this is 22 unique pieces that are 3D printed, could not have produced this economically with precast. And he had just the right client who wanted to do something super unique. And we had come into his office the day after he met with his client, and his client, when presented this concept that was made out of precast, was kind of like, it's kind of basic. It's kind of basic. And we happened to come into this landscape architect's office the next day.
Oh, cool.
And we told him, if you can dream it, we can print it.
Right.
And he goes, boy, do I have a project for you.
Challenge accepted, right?
Challenge accepted. Challenge accepted. So, yeah, I mean, we see that on a regular basis. This moment, Michael, where the realization that forms and molds really have been holding me back. But no one thinks in those terms, right? Landscape architects, like all of designers, right? We try to design within the constraints that we're aware of. In fact, that's the first question we normally get is, tell me the constraints of working in 3D concrete print. And I think that's probably the most challenging question to answer, is because usually the constraint is you.
Sure.
It's where your mind has been from the standpoint of how abusive and frustrating doing custom is. It tends to be slow and burdensome, right? That is the constraint. because we come from and dream from that reality. And instead, it's kind of like, how can I lift that off? And when that light bulb goes off, Michael, I mean, that's where people are like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
I can do incredible designs that I've never even touched with my imagination. I can turn my imagination back on is kind of the reaction some people, give to me when they finally get it.
I took a tour of Pikus 3D a couple years ago, and one of the things that I found interesting was no real inventory needed, right? So if there's a product that somebody has and they know they're going to have multiple, well, you don't have to anticipate and print them. You could just say, hey, we're ready to go, and then now you hit the button and print it and then pack it and ship it.
The only thing that sits on our shelf, Michael, you're right, we have no inventory, are the three elements that we need to print. It's our filament material, our mortar, poly, and activator. That's all that we have on the shelf. And you're right, because we're not doing something that's a cataloged item that someone dreamt about 10 years ago, we can respond to your dreams today and print something totally unique for your client.
Is that 3-part filament? Is that proprietary? Is it a third-party proprietary, or do you buy the raw materials and put it together yourselves?
Yeah, there are a number of manufacturers of filament around the world. And we have, of course, one of those providers and our special sauce, some trade secrets in combination, and that's how we print. Most of the uniqueness of what we're generating versus what everyone else is doing in the world does come down to experience. I think that's probably the biggest separation between us and anyone else who might go out and purchase a printer and filament today.
Where do you see Pikus 3D in 5 years and 10 years?
In 5 years, I see us having locations in every time zone in the US. We can design, engineer, and fabricate today from Utah, ship all over the nation competitively. As we see our capacity being fully utilized here, there's an accessibility interest for people to be able to visit and see. And we talk about the light bulbs going off, for architects and for developers. When they see it in person, it's just a fully different experience. And we recognize we're on the front end of the adoption curve here, Michael. As we get more into the center of that, we definitely see the demand curve picking up.
Architects and landscape architects are fascinated by how things work and how they're put together. And I will say that being in front of your printer at full size while it's printing is a very Tonka toy truck experience. Your inner child cannot help but come out. It's fascinating. It's huge.
It's very true. I mean, despite my best efforts, when we have guests walk in the front door and I try to channel them up the stairs to come upstairs and have lunch, they cannot stop themselves from veering left and heading straight towards the print bed.
I mean, it makes sense. Why would you? Why would you not be drawn to that and just have to do it?
It is mesmerizing to watch, and you're right, it is kind of a Tonka truck experience to see something be formed from the sand, right before your very eyes.
Mesmerizing is the right word. Even with my small printers at home, I just watch them print. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's very fascinating.
Yeah.
Do you have time-lapse cameras set up in your... Yeah.
We do, and time-lapse videos, I mean, we see a lot of hits on social media, as well as, it's fun just to see and tell the story in a matter of seconds, from the design process and the printing and extruding, and then the coating process, and, and then the installation into the process. It's a very rapid creation.
So instead of purchasing and working with another 3D printer here, strategically, it would be a second location somewhere in a different time zone, and then moving in that direction is what you were saying.
Yeah, I could see pros and cons to, just doing all of our production in one place, one big, perfect, automated facility. But having product that can be shipped at a moment's notice is helpful. The realities of construction, all of us who deal in construction and landscape architects certainly see this. The client wants to open their doors, the landscape's the last product to go in, and then something happens, right? In this case, if we were building this 35-foot seat wall that wraps in on itself, everyone knows the challenge of the final piece that comes in. Is it an inch short, or is it an inch long, or is it dead nuts? We all know the probability of it being spot on, 1/8 gap on both edges of that is fairly low, particularly as you go with very, very large on-site teams and different trades working. Being able to send that one last key into the loop and respond within a matter of even hours instead of days. Now, we can ship from here to Orlando, anywhere in the US, within 72 hours roughly, but having something within the same time zone is that much faster.
That's a really interesting concept that I didn't think about. So if you are doing a very challenging project, and let's say we're not putting any blame on anyone's fault, but something came up an inch short on your last key piece. That's detrimental to the design. Well, in that case, you would just go out, get a 3D scanner or tape measures or however, figure it out, and just reprint that piece.
Yeah, we're actually planning it with our teams on a large project that we're scheduled right now. And the final piece on all these loops that come back on themselves, we're planning intentionally on where that piece would be in the loop, what is the final piece, and what is the timing and workflow, and is anyone affected by that? Because we're often integrating the power driver and electrical chase into LED seat walls. Those kind of things have to be managed.
So that means then your in-house design team is ready to go. They know, hey, this is coming. They can anticipate that they're going to be receiving an email with dimensions, and then they just finish that last bit of setup and okay.
Yeah, in fact, we would have the entire model already presumed on what that final ideally is, and then we can adjust, a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and then hit print.
Any pleasant surprises about this industry since you've started? Like things that you just did not anticipate?
I've been pleasantly surprised by the embracing of general contractors. Most of our work has been with people who have high ideals to design, so landscape architects who are working with demanding clients in the amusement industry, corporate headquarters and lobbies, people who are going to spend big dollars, right? But the surprise has been is we, for example, in this recent stadium install, got the initial scope, the general contractor realized this is a schedule saving solution as well. So not only a design solution, it's a schedule solution. And I'll give you, for instance, they had some fire pits that the landscape architect had designed, and they were going to be cast in place. And what does that mean? You have a footer and a stem wall that supports this giant, 16-foot fire pit. Well,
that has to cure.
That has to, right? That has,
right.
And you got to think about, do I want to try to put a gas line through the stem wall after it's there, or do I want to put it there and form around it? And you got to coordinate. That's the GC's job. They got to coordinate those things. You don't want to end up with a fire pit that has no gas line, right? So they coordinate those details, and then they realize the lightweight 3D concrete is hollow, and we can set it direct on the hardscape. We don't need a stem wall at all. And so they have picked up on the time saving, and really it's the headache saving challenges that GCs run into, where they've said, hey, Pikus, can you guys do this scope? Can you do this scope? It simplifies our life.
So it almost seems like some of your top salesmen are going to be GCs showing the architects and the landscape architects, hey, look, I worked on this project. You might want to take a look. And they're doing it out of their interest, but then the landscape architect reviews it and says, oh, this does work, right?
Well, that's exactly what has happened. In fact, we got introduced to a very large architect in the United States because our landscape architect made the introduction after the GC said, oh my gosh, 2 thumbs up, we got to use this everywhere. And this designer had some challenges with their custom seating, right? Custom takes a long time. It can be a headache, not with 3D concrete print. And so we got an introduction, and they fell in love with the process. In fact, tomorrow I'm flying to Houston to present to all of their landscape architects in the United States.
One thing that a lot of disruptor companies, one of the challenges of a disrupting company is too rapid of a growth. Do you have a plan if all of a sudden it just becomes too fast, or not too fast, but just, I think, do you know what I'm asking? Like,
I do know what you're asking. Yeah. I mean, since I've been on the job, we've grown the top line 5,000%, and we have kept the team together. It is a unique team that wants to be in the throes of the beginnings of something that no one's done before. Some people love that and thrive in it. They want to pioneer and blaze a trail. That's the kind of people we have. But to your point, Michael, can we grow too fast? Right? There's the reality of, say, coding this product. We talked earlier. I mean, it takes a very bold owner to want to go raw print. And we knew we'd be 3D printing concrete. I didn't know we'd become experts or have to become experts in coatings. So we're working with coating systems that heretofore are primarily flooring coatings. And we're talking with specialists, and initially we had them come into our shop and do the coating system because we thought they were the expert. Come to find out, well, they're an expert at flat, but they don't have a clue on how to do curves. And that's the world we live in. And so we've had to come up to speed with how do we deal with these kind of specialized coatings on curved objects that are going vertical, not on a flat surface. And yes, so I think that it takes time to iterate through those challenges. And we recognize that as we work through market penetration, and we are focused on saturating a handful of markets, even though we can ship efficiently around the nation, we want to go deep with a few landscape architects and their trusted developer friends and those trusted GCs that work for those developers. And we recognize it's a tight-knit, close community that if bad word gets out, it spreads very quickly. And we want to make sure everyone has an incredible experience from the design end all the way through final installation and walkthrough.
Square footage becomes more scarce, people start building up, means more projects on structure, on podium.
Yeah, I think 3D concrete print was designed for exactly this situation, right? Where you have very limited pockets of land that are being developed, and there is a tendency to go vertical. In that situation, the coordination becomes important, right? I mean, we're working with a museum, a children's museum that's doing a rooftop planter situation. They're actually getting bold and doing all integral color. They're doing 5 different integral colors. Very excited about that. But we know that getting on top of that roof deck between cranes and freight elevators, and you can't put a 9-foot long precast item on most freight elevators, right? So you're stuck with craning. Our product, many times we can size specifically to their freight elevator, designed specifically with their, and that means we can get up there with a team. We don't have to have a crane operator. We don't have to coordinate with a crane, and now we're also working within the design limitations of that rooftop, right? We're often, with old buildings or being remodeled, stuck with whatever limitations they had when they designed this building in the 70s. And so 3D concrete print's able to have a very lightweight footprint that's able to be coordinated and installed with a smaller team and less equipment. And I think everyone wins in that process.
What's your favorite, what's one of your favorite books? Business or personal?
The Bible's my favorite book.
Why?
Because it's full of truth. And I learn from my Lord and Savior when I read my Bible.
Is faith important to you?
Faith's very important to me.
Why?
Faith's important to me. I think recognizing the constraints I live in. When I think of the creation process, that I have a creator that created everything from the unseen, that makes everything that we see. And to me, that's important to understand the creation process. It often comes from where do we initially dream, right? And understanding that we get to create. We're designed to create. That to me is important to understand my part in that. So, back to why is my faith important to that? Because I feel a connection to other creators in supporting their creation process. Then I talk with my team. I'm like, look, Pikus 3D is not the hero of the process. The hero of the process is the creator. We're often coming alongside in supporting that landscape architect who is interpreting what their developer wants to achieve. And so I love the iteration that we get invited into what is often something that's never been done before. And I think that aspect of creating is really fascinating to me.
There's a lot of creatives that have been having the conversation that creativity is not so much the designer coming up with an idea, but allowing the collective creative consciousness flow through you, and you are like the channel of it. And that gets into, I suppose, philosophical debates or however, but I do think that's a very interesting angle to entertain.
I think the concept, right, when we talk about creating, is it about putting your hands on the clay and forming it into a shape? Or to your point, is it really the inspiration that initially comes, and is that coming from the spiritual realm, right? Are we channeling the Holy Spirit? Are we channeling a different spirit? What's really the inspiration of our creation process? Yeah, I agree with you, could be debated. And I think we're part of that in what we're doing here at Pikus.
I agree. I think that's an interesting way of looking at the creative process. Yeah. And even if somebody is not fully subscribed to that, just taking moments while you're designing to allow, like, not blocking any of that energy to go through you, whether it be through God or however you see the universe or whatever, just letting that all flow through you, and then whether you're in AutoCAD or on paper or with physical clay, and kind of going from there. So your process would be called an additive process versus a subtractive process, right? So a subtractive process would be you get a block of marble, you get a chisel, and you remove until you get Michelangelo, or sorry, not Michelangelo, David. Will there be any subtractive processes in your future, or are we going to stay with additive?
Yes, we are not opposed to the subtractive process, and I agree with you. I think that there's something to be said about the additive or the the automated creation process of the future. We talked previously about our 5-year plan. The 10-year plan, I think, does include a process that understands where we use subtractive appropriately. I'll give you an example. Concrete slides. I never thought I'd get a call from a playground designer and builder where they said, hey, we normally are working with plastic slides, and there's some medical conditions, I guess, that are problematic for some children because of the static, and so they've moved to stainless steel, but those can be very hot in some climates, and so they're looking at, can we come up with a concrete slide?
Interesting. And you being you was like, sure.
I just thought, like, and this is representative of like all the use cases that are out there. I mean, we're just at the tip of the iceberg, and so we get some of these things that come to us, and your comment earlier about the roping or the corduroy, the resolution that's left by our print is not great for sliding down. It's great for deterring skateboarders actually on benches. It's not great for sliding down quickly. And so we would have to subtract some material in theory, or add some material to fill in those valleys and effectively level off the concrete slide. So I think that would be a situation. I also see some facade designs. When you think of printing panels or columns, maybe someone wants a finish that today, to achieve that finish, we actually have to add on top of the additive manufacturing with a coating system. It would be nice to 3D print and then just subtract and actually make the finished product really just a reveal that is subtracted off of the print.
This is I speak with a lot of disruptors just because I'm fascinated by people and companies that are doing disruptive processes. And one of my favorite questions to ask people in a disruptive industry is, how are you going to protect yourself from the next disruption? Like, when do you not get married to your own dogma and not able to see what's coming next? Look at Kodak, right? Look at other things, Blockbuster Video, things where they had the opportunity, but they're so married and so into their dogma that they just can't. How do you protect yourself from that?
Boy, I think part of it's having a culture that says, look, we don't have a monopoly on the best ideas. We have to be aware that even the best idea might come from an ancillary industry. So let me first say, truly being transparent with ourselves and with a landscape architect and their client, saying, here's the pros and cons of precast and cast in place and 3D concrete print. I don't think there's like someone who's the best at everything. And that's why all these technologies exist today. But being willing to look outside of our industry and say, what are people doing that helps speed the creative process? Because right now we're working with a lot of 3D models. Like, when you think of the creative process from concept all the way to install, a decent amount of our energy is actually getting the 3D model correct, which is interesting because cast in place versus precast versus us, we're the only one that fabricates directly from the model, which keeps us, I think, closest to the heart of the designer.
Interesting. So you do think about that?
I do think about it. So I want a culture that says, look, I mean, maybe someone down the street has a better idea. Maybe there's an idea out there that we should leverage, or we should decide to not recommend our technology in these certain use cases. There might be a better technology and we should find someone else to send them to.
What's your job description on paper, and what's the reality of your job?
Oh my goodness.
What's the difference?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on paper, what does a president of an early stage tech construction tech business do? is probably not different from a lot of early stage presidents, which is you have to design product, you have to design team, you lead the culture, you understand the values, you hire people to those values, you're clear on accountability and what they should or should not do. And then if you can't hire for those and you have no more money left for the hires you would like to have, you have to do it all yourself, right? So it's anything that you can't get done through your team, you have to do yourself. Or to your comment earlier, figure out how to do with partners in the industry, or pass on opportunities, right? Yeah, so the job description, it morphs every 3 to 6 months. It changes just as this business does with every season as we grow.
As a self-proclaimed disruptor in an industry, when you are taking on that challenge, there's unforeseen things that are going to happen, and your companies have to grow in ways that you can't predict. I'm assuming then that you as a person, as like an individual, as the president, would also have to be able to grow in your skill set and what you can handle. Your personal growth has to align with that. Have you experienced that, and do you think about that as well?
Without a doubt, I have experienced.
How so?
Yeah, the stretching of an early stage business that has grown 50-fold in the last 3 years absolutely has stretched everybody on our team. For me personally, it stretched me. I've traveled more than I ever have in my life, visiting with people and telling the story about our invitation to adventure, of them being able to create without being constrained. The way that it's challenged me in particular, though, has been the fact that the story does appeal to a lot of people. To be able to design and create without limits, we do get requests from LA to Maine to Orlando. And there's some things that we ought to just say geographically, that's not our playground today, and we're being focused to saturate in a particular area, because it does take a great installer. It takes a great landscaper who's in touch with his client. And we've got to bring all those things together at one point in time. I think that's been one of the bigger challenges, is to remain laser focused. It's been a discipline that I've appreciated in this season. I think will continue to be our North Star as we continue to have success.
I love that, being laser focused. Me personally, I've been entertaining the idea of having a piece of paper and writing clarity on it, and then just being, what can I be more clear on today than I've ever been, and then tackling that. I'll have my task lists and I'll have all the other things that I need to do, but just the concept of being like, is this super clear, or is it muddied with all kinds of things? And
yeah, I've experienced that, Michael, with our use cases, our product types. I think I used to say, literally come out of my mouth, if you can dream it, we can print it. That's not the best place to start. I've found it's better to say, engaging seating, engaging seating, engaging seating. If you want seating to have lights or sound, haptics, water flowing out of fire, design that looks sculptural, that's our playground.
So your product then is able to do water? Can you do like water fountains?
Absolutely. We've done fountains. We've done many water features. 2023, we ship a lot of water features.
Oh, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so the structural integrity then obviously can handle the weight of water. And
the structure's not an issue, but actually the reason why it gets chosen by designers is because it's hollow. So the Omni Hotel was redoing their presidential suite in Orlando. They wanted a quick connect solution that didn't require a vault. You pay money for a vault because most fountains are solid, right? So you're having to create another space for stuff. And in our case, we did all the plumbing, all the mechanicals, all the valves and everything was self-contained within the footprint of the fountain. So when it arrived on site, the landscaper who worked with the landscape designer ensured that this thing could just be set on the ground, quick connect electrical, quick connect plumbing, they got the water running, and everyone's life is easier.
That's interesting. I one of my clients is a pool contractor now, and he said that they don't do. He can't remember the last time that he did a pool project that didn't have a water feature. Everybody wants water features now. And so your product could kind of come in and solve a lot of problems where, the vault is normally for the pool equipment and all that stuff, and now you could have a less of a footprint for yours if it's an accessory to it.
From the landscape architect's point of view, it beautifies the solution. From the installer's perspective, it makes it faster to install, and you have less contracts to deal with, right? It just makes everything easier in that case because we have a hollow structure to work with.
Do you think that you're making the custom world funner?
Without a doubt.
How so?
Michael, we continue to hear that the landscape architect who considers something that's not in a catalog, that's totally custom and unique, we hear there's a little bit of burden of how much time am I gonna have to spend on this, and what's the lead time like for this product. And here we brought a solution that is both fun and fast. Fun in the sense that we're working in 3D models and there's a back and forth and some adjustment, and we found that our expertise in 3D modeling has served as a benefit to the design process, even to getting the CD set put together and just making the life easier for the landscape architect and doing custom.
Awesome. Do you have any closing thoughts or advice that you would like to share with the public?
Yeah. I'd say my closing thoughts are, look, we've only just begun. The number of things that can be created custom are still being dreamed about, and we're looking for more landscape architects who say, oh man, I've got a dream, I've always wanted to create this, or I've got a project right now, a schematic I could send to you. And getting those schematics sent to us via create@pikus3d.com is probably the best way to get started. We get some artwork from you, and then we can respond with a render or a miniature and begin our iteration process to get to something that's super exciting.
Awesome. I love it.